Good morning. Welcome back to the Ozigi Chronicles. I'm your host, Ozigi, and I know it's been such a long time, but today we have a special episode and we're shooting it in a professional studio. And today I have a special guest with me, Micah, Sterrett. And before we get in, I like that you know a little bit more about the host about the guest. And I'm gonna let you take it. Like Micah, I think we've known each other for 3 years now. I think this December.
Is
right?
it this December? Yeah, because was it 2018?
2018, yeah, we started.
December of 2018
yeah,
we opened, yeah. So we've known each other for about 3 years now. Started out through work.
Yeah.
And I was working at the Chick-fil-A in Hicksville and then transferred to the Roosevelt Field one at the mall here in 2018. And you were hired there too. And
yeah.
That's how we met. And yeah, it's been 3 years. Doesn't seem like that long. It seems like it's gone by really fast. It's been really great.
Yeah, it's been. Yeah, but we started working at Chick-fil-A, and it's been a journey. I think we stopped working there. You work in a different Chick-fil-A. I work another job right now. But I've known you, and you've told me a lot about yourself. So I want you to tell me about growing up, because I know you moved to New York. Not too long ago, like 5 years ago.
Yeah,
less than 5 years
August of 2017. So
yeah,
it's actually not even 5 years. It's about like 4 and a little bit more.
Right. So talk to me about moving from place to place, because I know you moved to, I believe, Missouri, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Then you moved, like you were in PA, Missouri, going to New York. So tell me how it was growing up, because I know it must have been difficult.
Yeah. So I was born. Well, actually, I was born in Stroudsburg, PA. But at the time, my parents were living in West Philadelphia, in the city proper, and I'm the oldest of 5, and so growing up, it was pretty awesome. We lived in this huge old 100-year-old house in West Philadelphia, and I just enjoyed growing up. A lot of my memories are of playing outside. We had a big yard. I played a lot of sports with my siblings, with neighborhood kids. Spent a lot of time outside. I was homeschooled growing up, and I really enjoyed that. And at the time, my dad was a carpenter, so he was working on a lot of houses in the area. So I got to go to work with him actually pretty often. I was homeschooled growing up, so I didn't have school restrictions as much, and so I learned a lot from him and just working with him, both at jobs and also around our house, because he was always doing repairs on our home. And so I really liked it there. It was a really great community. My dad did work for the neighbors close to us, and so we knew them very well. A lot of their children and grandchildren, I would play basketball with them all the time, and it was pretty awesome. When we would go on vacation, they would watch our house, make sure everything was good. When they would go on vacation, we would watch their house, make sure everything was good, and it was a nice little community that we had. And then when I was 8 or 9, my dad got Lyme disease. So I don't know how much you know about that, but it's a disease basically that's carried through a deer tick. And so my grandparents live on 200 acres in the Harrisburg area. So when I was growing up, that was our main vacation spot. So we would often go and visit them. Of course, we went other places, but a lot of times we would drive out there. It's about a 2-hour drive from where we lived. And they live it's a very wooded area. Most of it, they sold part of the land eventually to become state game lands, but most of it is heavily wooded, and there's a lot of deer. And so one time, I think it was in the summer, we went on vacation, and my dad came back, and he wasn't feeling so great, and he got this bullseye rash. So it's like a rash. It's very red in the center. It gets a little bit less red on the outside. It's more pink on the outside, but it's basically like a ring, basically like a bullseye. And he didn't even know what it was. He thought it was some weird spider bite or something like that he got in the woods, because we had been out hiking. That's a thing that we did together as a family a lot with my grandparents and whatnot. My grandfather would take us around the land, and he knows all about the history of it. Very cool. It's been in his family. I think his great grandfather bought it during the Great Depression, and he knows all the history about all the buildings, what part of land, who owns what, because it eventually got split up between the children. So it's very interesting. So we often go walking in the woods with him. I think that's actually what we were doing when my dad got bit. And anyway, so he didn't know what this was. And he was thinking about going to the doctor, and he had a buddy who he worked with who's from Lancaster County. And they have a lot of problems with Lyme disease in Lancaster County, at least they did at that time. And so he showed it to him. He's like, yeah, I have to show you this really weird rash I have. It's what do you think it is? And the guy's like, you should go see a doctor. You have Lyme disease. So he went to see a doctor. It turned out he has Lyme disease, and I don't exactly know how to describe it, not having had it myself. but I'll do my best. Like, he would just describe like extreme fatigue. Like, there would be mornings where he would wake up and couldn't get out of bed in the morning, and like no motivation, like physically unable to like get up and go to work, like all of a sudden. And like, this is my dad who would like get up and go to work every day, so it was like very different. And like, he would have like struggles with memory loss and other things. Like he describes like going to his truck, like he'd be at a job and then he'd go to his truck to get a tool, and he would be at his truck and he couldn't even remember what tool he went there to get in the first place. So it really, I mean, it basically like completely like made it almost impossible for him to work. And he had always worked this very like, I mean, as a carpenter, it's a pretty physical demanding job.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he like a lot of climbing, a lot of lifting, all that kind of stuff, and he just wasn't able to do that. And so for like, I want to say almost a year, like he worked a little bit, but like basically like family supported us, and like it was a pretty difficult time. Mm-hmm. And so basically he realized he wasn't going to be able to continue doing that job, and he pursued a lot of different like remedies, and a lot of times they prescribe antibiotics, but the problem is that doesn't actually get rid of Lyme disease. It kind of just drives the organism into hiding, basically, and then as soon as you stop taking antibiotics, it comes back out and you have the same problems. And he pursued some other like homeopathic remedies and stuff, and like continuing the story. I mean, to this day, it's definitely better than it ever has been, and he's made certain lifestyle changes that have helped him. But he still has some days where, like, in some weeks that it's very difficult. But anyway, so that led him to stop doing carpentry, and he started considering doing other things. And one of the things he considered was going to seminary, and he felt called to do that. I don't know all of the reasons why, but eventually, so he applied to there's a seminary in that's associated with the denomination of church we were going to at the time. That's in Pennsylvania, actually right in the Philly area, Westminster Theological Seminary. But like I think their registration was already closed, or they weren't as willing to work with him, especially financially. And so he explored going to Covenant Seminary, which is another seminary that has similar denominational lines, that's in St. Louis, Missouri, right outside the city. And they were like really helpful, like financially, like they helped him. He was like late in like basically registering, and they were willing to work with him on that and everything like that. And so basically he ended up going there. And so when I was 10, we moved from West Philadelphia to St. Louis. My parents bought a house, actually without ever seeing it, which is interesting. It turned out to be a great house.
Imagine. Okay.
Yeah, they were working with a realtor, and the realtor, he actually, like, he's like, yeah, you should check this house out, but like he wasn't available at the time. And so they were looking at other houses. They like flew out there because they wanted to know where we could live. They were looking at a lot of houses. And he was like, yeah, this is a good house, like you should go check it out, but it's like locked up and they weren't able to go inside. So they just like looked around the outside, they looked at pictures online, and they really liked the area, and they bought it, and it turned out to be an amazing house. Anyway, so moved there, and that was really, really different. Very different from the East Coast, like culturally, socially. Mm-hmm. St. Louis, like Philly's a big city, not as big as New York, obviously, but St. Louis feels like a small town compared to Philly. Very different. Wow. And so like, while I enjoyed living there, it was also very different, and it also like felt very like transient, kind of, because I knew like my dad was going to be done in 4 years, and we didn't really know what we were going to do after, but there was kind of always this feeling that I wasn't going to live there for like a long period of time. And so it was a very interesting experience. Like, I didn't make a ton of friends there. We actually had one family on our block whose kids would come over all the time, and we got to be good friends with them. But other than that, I didn't make a lot of friends there, and it was just it was a very eye-opening experience. I'm very glad I had it, because it definitely like helped me just like grow and experience and like understand where other people live, where other people are coming from. Since then, I've interacted with other friends from the Midwest, and I definitely have a better idea of what it's like to live in the Midwest, having lived there myself. But I wouldn't describe it as my favorite place to live. Just say that.
So are you in New York?
What?
New York?
Is New York my favorite place to live? I would also say New York is not my favorite place to live.
Damn.
In fact, I hope that when I graduate from college, I will leave New York.
To go to PA?
Yeah, I think to go to PA. There's some things about New York, especially Long Island. It's just, I mean, you can think about purely practical reasons, like the fact that it's just mad expensive to live here.
Oh yeah, it is expensive, yeah.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
Everything costs so much. There's so many people everywhere. I mean, I just get weary of sitting in traffic all the time.
But you make money. You make more money here, though.
You do make more money, but I feel like over time, like not over time, but like it balances out, doesn't it? Because like for instance, like I'm just thinking going back, like my first Chick-fil-A job in Pennsylvania, right? I was making like $8.50 an hour, right?
Oh, yeah.
Really, really low. And like I got bumped up later on, but like also the cost of living where I was living at that time is much lower. So I'm making $8.50 an hour, which is much less than I make right now, right? But I'm also, when I go out to the store, right, I'm paying less for everything. Here I'm making much more, but I'm also going out and paying much more.
Yeah.
And like, of course, like I'd have to do the math to really know like if I am like actually making more in terms of like cost of living. But like, I feel like when push comes to shove, it's probably not too significant of a difference, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So, I mean, and then like, just like socially, like all of my friends live in PA.
So it's just more better, yeah.
And also like, I also like something I really like enjoy is being outdoors and like enjoying like nature and like hiking, and like we were talking on the way here about like me getting to go kayaking this weekend and stuff like that, and like it's just not as much of that available here. Like where I go to school, I can literally like any weekend just get up, like take my tent and like just go out into the woods and just camp. Literally just like build a fire. There's a place close by, just drive there. There's like woods all around where I go to school. And like here, I just can't do that. And so like, and also like my grandparents who I'm close to live in PA, my aunt and uncle who I'm close to live in PA. It's just like, I don't know. It's just, it feels like here it feels very isolated, and it's just like there's a lot of things that are just not.
No, it doesn't click with you. Like for example, the woods, upstate. You have to go to upstate to be around the woods, and you know.
Yeah, exactly. And
but
like,
yeah.
Even upstate, I don't know. Maybe it's just that I'm a Pennsylvania boy.
Yeah, I think you are.
I think that's what I enjoy. I mean, I do enjoy going upstate. We have someone in our church who owns a house up by Lake George, and that is very cool. Like I've been up there a couple times. But even there, I feel like there's a lot of people. But that's only one small place, so I shouldn't speak. I haven't been. I've heard that it's like gorgeous up there in a lot of places. And one of my friend's brother-in-law, his family lives in the Adirondacks, and so they've been inviting me and him to come up there for a while. So I'm really hoping that like maybe this summer I can go up there and like stay with them. And from what he's described, it seems very cool. So maybe that'll change my mind a little bit.
You're not gonna lie. I do agree with like the nature part. I love when I'm around like trees and.
Yeah.
I would love to go to a cottage and just like have a fire there and just chill, like with no technological distractions, because that, you know, especially in society right now where people are a lot of the time they're using the phone, including me, I can't lie. So yeah, I feel like just like retreating back there and visiting this forest, even hiking or like running through the woods, that's something that really interests me. Like I would love to do that. But in New York, we're here, not really, especially the area where we live, because there's not a lot of national parks. We have to go upstate or have to go to other states to, you know, enjoy those natural stuff. Yes. Also, I want to talk about leadership, because you were director at our Chick-fil-A that we worked with, and I think you were a shift leader prior to that?
Yeah, so actually at my first Chick-fil-A job, which was back in Pennsylvania, I was on the cusp of getting promoted, and then they basically, they were supposed to close the Chick-fil-A, and I chose to leave, and so I didn't get promoted. But then as soon as I came to Hicksville here, when I moved to New York in 2017, like we were talking about earlier, I basically worked for like a couple months, and then they made me a shift leader. So I had been a low-level shift leader before I came to Roosevelt.
Okay. So. And have you always wanted to be, because as shift leader, you have more responsibilities. It's basically like a leader. So like, have you ever sought that type of like new role, type of power? Like, did you ever dream about being a leader, or just you were working hard and it just gave it to you?
That's a really good question. So this is interesting. It's something I've thought about, especially since now I'm no longer a leader. So now I like work under leaders again, like I had previously. And now that really bothers me. And I've thought back to my days pre-being a leader and wondered, like, is that something that I always wanted? I don't necessarily think that it was, to be honest. Like, I wanted to do a good job, and like, I think I wanted to be recognized, maybe even too much sometimes. But I never, like, when I started working at Chick-fil-A, or even when I came to Hicksville, I was never like, oh, like the like goal of me coming here is to become a leader or stuff like that. Like initially, like especially my initial shift leader position at Hicksville, it was just because like I just showed up every day and like worked really hard and did my job well. And like eventually, when I saw others getting promoted who I felt like didn't necessarily do the job the same way that I did, I started being like, well, if they can fulfill that role, I definitely think that I can fulfill that role. And like, I started to realize that I think I had some gifts in terms of leading people. Like basically like when I came to Hicksville, they were short on leaders, and a lot of the leaders were wildly inexperienced. So like they had a girl there who was like in high school at 17, couldn't even work like a full 8-hour shift during the weekdays because of like labor law restrictions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so like I would like literally like end up running shifts like as a team member. Like they would give me a thing, I would run breaks, I would do that kind of stuff. And so like the more I got into it, I was like, like I like doing this. Like it's enjoyable. I like working with people. To me it was kind of like a puzzle, like who can go on break here, who can we put here, like teaching people new things. And so like I started to realize that I thought I would enjoy that. And I did enjoy it. Like I think like you do say you're 100% correct in saying there's more responsibility, and so that part is challenging. But I think like definitely like when I walked away from Hicksville, like as I came to Roosevelt Field, like I look back on my leadership experience there as a positive thing.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. It seems like so you just basically worked your way up and you're getting accustomed to it as a team member, and you're like, if I can do this as a team member, what can I do as a leader?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Interesting. Because I thought people would want to be in a position of power, so they always seek to gain the recognition, and they will always like tell their boss like, promote me, I'm doing this and that. But I don't know, it's something I thought about, like, do people actually seek power, or it just comes to them naturally? Because I'm naturally a leader, so of course I'm gonna promote you, of course I'm gonna be a leader.
I mean, I think there are definitely people who are gifted to be natural leaders, like people that you gravitate towards. People that other people gravitate towards, and definitely have, I don't know if charisma, maybe charisma is the right word. They have something where they're able to like guide and direct people in a obviously like a non-demeaning way. And there is bad leadership, of course, but like there are definitely people who have those gifts. I don't really question that. And there are people who are amazing employees who don't necessarily have those gifts, and so I think people do desire power, and I think a lot of times it's for the wrong reasons. And so like, what am I trying to say here? Like, I think people do long to get promoted, but I think when that comes to, when like that's the case, then it's up to people who are in higher positions of leadership to determine whether that's really the case. Like you should never give someone power, obviously, for the sake of giving them power. And like, for me, as like coming from my own leadership experience, I actually think like what you said, where people are like, oh, I should get promoted, I should do this, I should do that. Like, to me, that's actually a red flag. I think that the best way for someone to become a leader is for them to work hard, to demonstrate their skill, and to be recognized by others around them. I actually think that when someone ends up tooting their own horn like that, like telling their leaders, I should get a promotion, I should get this, I should get that, that's actually a sign that what they really want is the power. I think leadership should be given to someone who has the gifts. You shouldn't bestow power on someone just because like they ask for it, or because like they have somewhat, like, there are a lot of people who are going to come to, like, let's say a Chick-fil-A and kind of know what they're doing, but that doesn't mean they're deserving of that kind of power and authority, because like I don't think we realize, even in a small setting like that, the effect that like your leadership can have on the people around you. Even like when I was at Roosevelt Field, Joe, who was our boss, Joe, he would tell me, like, us leaders a lot of the time, like, the reason people stay, like one of the number one reasons people stay in a business is because like of their leaders, and like, do they feel valued and cared for? And like, that is like the value and care for, like, that's the responsibility of leaders. And so I don't think that like leadership is something that should be given away lightly just to people who are somewhat competent at something. But
they should tick all the boxes of a leadership. Be caring, be charismatic. You should care about your employees, and you should criticize when you need to, but don't overdo it, because you're gonna drive them away. I want you to describe your leadership experience, because you were my boss at one point in time.
Yeah.
So, well, when you were working with us, it was something else. Because I know you were hardworking. You got your stuff done. Then people were like, oh, well, yeah, you were in a way mean, as people would say, because you were like, oh, do this and that. But then at the end of the day, like, it was effective, because the whole kitchen was tight. We did our jobs, At the end of the day, everything was done. Of course, some people were like, oh, why is he yelling? Why is he saying this and that? Da, da, da. But I guess us in back at the house, we're just used to it. Like, we know who you are, and you're, how you are as a leader. So I want you, from your point of view, describe how you led, or like, and also I want you to describe your ideal leadership. Like, what type of ideal leader do you aspire to be?
Okay, let's start with the ideal. So I think that let's think about this. Like an experience that happened early on to me that shaped some of the way that I thought about leadership was like at my first job at a Chick-fil-A. Like I remember one night I was closing, and this Chick-fil-A used to take us a long time to close, sometimes like 2 hours. So we'd be there till like midnight, 1 in the morning. And it was a really rough night. And we were just like trying to get out of there. And like usually the manager, like who was in charge, would go in the office and count the money at the end of the night. And so basically the closing was up to like there was a lower level shift leader and then the people, whoever the closers were. And I remember specifically one night, like it was a long night. We were doing things, and then all of a sudden, like the manager who's supposed to be counting money came out of the office, and like he rolled up his sleeves, and like he got out a squeegee, those things we use to clean the floor, and like he started doing the floors with us, and we were just kind of like, wow, that's really cool. And like he helped us do we did all the floors, we finished the kitchen, like we got out earlier than we would have gotten out had he not helped us, and that like really stood out to me. And then another example was like same thing one night I was doing dishes, and like it was back before we had the metal trays, so we had the yellow plastic trays. We had those at Rizzo. Yeah. And like there were just stacks of them like in the sink. I just remember, and like I went to the office and I knocked on the door, and I said to the manager, I was like, and I was pretty young at this time, and I was getting overwhelmed, and I was like, I don't know how like I'm ever gonna finish all these in the time we're gonna be here all night. And like he came out of the office and like same thing, like rolled up his sleeves. Like they all had like they would all wear dress shirts to work. Like he took off his dress shirt and like put on a chef coat like we would wear. And like he came and like he basically washed dishes with me until we finished. And like those are two times that really stood out to me. And like that's what I think real leadership is. Like, and so let me describe it here. And like another thing that also shaped me is Joe always said, and I think this is right, never ask someone to do something that you can't do or won't do. And that doesn't mean you have to do everything, but it does mean that you should be willing to do anything with your employees. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what real leadership looks like. Like, I took a class last semester, and we talked about leadership a lot. And I think it's this model of servant leadership, where your goal as the leader is to be a blessing to the people that you lead. It's not, and we talked about power earlier. A lot of people want power just so they can tell people go here, go there. It gives them a kind of sense of fulfillment. And it's about them, and servant leadership is not like that. Servant leadership is about the people that you lead. So you're thinking like stuff has to get done, no question. It doesn't mean that the inmates run the prison, if you know what I mean, or that like basically, like let's say I'm the leader, I let you guys do whatever you want. But it does mean that like when I'm thinking about making decisions and when I'm asking you to do things and when I tell you to go like get something done, that I'm thinking about like how are you going to view that? How are you going to think about that? Like and I'm constantly having the people that I'm leading in mind, and also like and it also starts with me demonstrating that. So like I think like you remember I always like I wanted things cleaned a certain way. I wanted a certain level of intensity or a certain level of hard work, and like of course I don't do this perfectly because I'm not a perfect person, but I would hope that I would demonstrate those things to you. So when I say like I want this cleaned in a certain way, I'm going to show you how to do it the first time, or I'm going to have someone instruct you, or I'm going to walk you. I might not clean the whole thing, but I might walk you through the steps of how to do that. Or if I say like I want us out at a certain time, like when we're closing, it's not that I'm sitting in the office and you guys are closing and I'm like, I can't believe you guys aren't out, but it's like I'm in the kitchen with you guys showing you how we can get out at this certain time. Or like if I'm asking you like, there's a lot of nasty things to clean, let's say in the back of a Chick-fil-A, or like at the end of the night, like it's not pleasant. Like I would never ask you to clean something that I wouldn't clean. And I think that's what leadership looks like. It's having the people that you lead in mind when you lead. So like think like, if I notice, like if I walk in the kitchen, like I notice like maybe you're tired, or like maybe I ask you to do like something all day, like the same position all day, and I know that's challenging. Like I don't enjoy doing that, and so like I'll be understanding as a leader. Maybe I come over and like, Munir, like I really need you to do this position all day. I really need that. Like, but like every hour or so, I'm like, do you need 5 minutes to take a rest? Like I'll cover you. Like, do you need, like, can I get you water? Can I help you do this? Can I help you do that? Like, help you know that I appreciate what you're doing for me. Like, I really appreciate you being willing to do this on a day. Like, I understand it's not fun, but I really appreciate that. And so I think it's really an employee-centered approach as opposed to a leader-centered approach.
It's more narcissistic, So describe how you, through your perspective, how you led at our Chick-fil-A.
I mean, I talked through a few examples, like, just now, but like, I mean, like, I think like I demanded a certain intensity and like speed level and work level from you guys. But I think that like, and again, I say this like I don't think I demonstrated this perfectly, but like I would expect myself to be the one to set that standard, if you know what I mean. Like to come in every day. If I expect a certain intensity from you every day, then I should come in every day with that same intensity. And if I expect a certain quality, let's say of like chicken, like that's being made, then I am the one who's gonna, demonstrate that quality before I'm allowing you guys to do that. And like I do, like some things I used to do is like I used to really rotate you guys through positions. Like when I started, like especially when I worked at Hicksville, I used to come in every day, like 5-6 days a week, and I would bread every day from 5:45 to 3 o'clock every day. Pretty much, like some days I'd do fries as like a little break. But like with you guys, I tried to make sure that at least you're doing 2 positions during every shift, that there's no one coming in for like 9-10 hours and doing one thing for an entire day. Because I know, as someone who's worked in a kitchen and been under leaders who just had me do the same thing all day, every day, that is very boring. It's very monotonous. It gets tiring. It's hard to stay focused. It can be really frustrating at times. And so I wouldn't want to ask you guys to do something like that.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, just, I mean, and also like when I'm asking you guys to do things that like are a real help to me that I know aren't always fun for you guys, I always try to like thank you guys for it. Like I really appreciate you. Like when I asked, for instance, like if I had a closer call on and someone was willing to close, like I think our mutual friend Jason, like a lot of nights, like I would be like, Jason, like you're leaving at like 9. Would you stay till 10 and close? And like I would try to be appreciative of him, like let him know how like that I really appreciated that. And like sometimes even like I would buy like people who were willing to close like a milkshake or something, or some small thing if I thought that would communicate to them that I really appreciated what they were doing. Because like people need, like we talked, like I said earlier, people stay because they feel valued and cared for, and that's the most important thing.
Okay, that's good. That's true.
So can I throw a question back in your face though? Like,
yeah.
I'm interested to hear your perspective on it, because like we've talked back and forth about this a little bit, and like you mentioned a little bit what your view is, but like in terms of the kitchen and like the way that I led, like give me a little bit of your take on that and your perspective on that.
Well, yeah, I already said it. Like, yeah, we got everything done. Like at the end of the day, we're here to work and be successful and win in the kitchen. So of course, there was like systems where it was set up in which it didn't bring out the best. Like for example, hiring a lot of young people, and like in a way who are still living under their parents and like kind of entitled. Yeah. So like those people, sometimes they don't tend to work hard. Or like, even young people too. Like when I was 16, this was my first job, so I really didn't know how to like do this or do that. It was like my first time in the real world working, and yeah, it opened my eyes a lot. But then of course, like we had a lot of leaders back then. And I aspired to be a leader too, but for me to be like, I think for a leader to be a leader, you have to kind of work your way up and go through the ranks and just be a normal employee and just like put your head down and work. Then as soon as you just climb up the ranks and people recognize your hard work. But as for you, like you were, I would say like we got our thing done. Like sometimes it was a lot of people expected like to be friendly, like hey, because remember I think last week we were talking with Jason, and you were like, if someone was slow in a certain position, you wouldn't say anything, like okay, just. Oh, you would try to say it in a nice way, but you would just be like, okay, just leave the position and you put someone else, or you do it yourself, because that person was, slow. Particularly, like most of us are young in the back at the house, and it was probably our first or second job. So like we really know how to like be up to speed with things. But yeah, I would say like for sure you worked hard, and you were on call all the time, even though you're college students. I would say under you, we're expecting a little bit more like niceness and like be friendly and stuff. But then when we were here, like we would hear you yelling or something, like as you're washing dishes, like you could hear like the chaos going on in the back as you're washing the dishes, and everyone's just surprised, like damn, relax, bro. But yeah, I would say that you were a good leader. Even like looking back at hindsight, after you left and other leaders came back, people were like, okay, like Micah, we had to go with him because we actually got our thing done. And then some leader will come and it wouldn't be as intense, or they'll hire like the wrong people. Because I said like systems in place. If you're hiring the wrong people, like especially like young people, which I think young people, of course, you could hire them, but you're gonna have, it has a pros and cons. Like they could be more loyal to and have more years to be with you. And the other con, like they don't work as hard, or there tends to be more drama, as you saw at Chick-fil-A. So it kind of, the workplace with young people is completely different with the workplace with older and who are more experienced. But as for you, yeah, I would say, yeah, you were a decent leader.
Well, it's really good to hear. It's very interesting to hear your perspective on all that because, yeah, it's pretty awesome. I enjoy hearing that, both the pros and the cons. But like, how would you describe the kitchen culture? Like, let's say someone who was never there, like with us, and like I'm especially talking like, you know, January to the December when I left. Like, I personally felt like we had something really special that I really enjoyed. But like, how would you describe the way like everybody pushed everybody else and like the kind of vibe like in the kitchen, like when we came in, like you said earlier, like maybe people were expecting more friendliness. Like, would you say we like weren't as friendly, or like how describe like can try to give a feel for that kind of culture and that.
This is when you were there.
Or yeah, when I was there.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Especially like post like when Malin left, like post Malin, like January. I think that was January of 2020. Yeah, January of 2020 to like December of 2020. Because then I left like right after Christmas in 2020. That's when I went to school. So like, kind of, what was the feel kind of like?
Cool kitchen culture. Well, I would say like everyone. I think everyone was good. We had no drama or anything. Well, we had certain dramas, but like we were all friends. Like we could help each other after work. Sometimes we go to a bowling or we go to the movies or something like that, and we made lifelong friends there. Like I still talk to you even though we don't work at the same job anymore. But the kitchen culture,
Like in terms of like. I don't know if I want to call it peer pressure, but like the way we always push each other, like even like silly examples of like everyone be like, oh, let's go, like I want to see you go faster, like what is this, like like kind of the back and forth, the like sarcasm, like the joking around. It's like, do you view that as a positive thing that helped us kind of push each other to be better, or do you view that as kind of just a drawback and something that like maybe even held us back a little bit?
No, I think it was good. But as I said, we were young people back then. Like we expect the world to be like a little bit more chill and relaxed to us. So. Sometimes it comes to us as a shock, but I think for a majority of us, like we used to make jokes like let's go, because we are trying to leave there as soon as possible. We're not trying to stay there. Like okay, yeah, we're friends, but I want to go home and sleep. And I would say it was a good thing because I think in an effective team, you need people who are gonna push each other. Like you cannot have any slack offs. If it's a dead end, like you're gonna leave. So like I believe that effective teams who are actually like building towards building like a strong company or like a strong like team in general, like you need people who are willing to say like, listen, but you're not doing that enough of a good job. Like you have to, like, let's go pick it up.
And in a way, and I agree with you. And like, I think like, not all the time, but like there was a lot of times where it was done in a way where like it's not like, oh, you're bad at your job, but more just like kind of and like messing around. Like I felt like everybody had their place. Like people knew that like I know from my perspective, like everyone in the kitchen, like they all had like certain things they were good at, and like I felt like they were like an integral part of the kitchen and valued, and like everybody had their place, and it was just kind of like, I don't know, I felt like it was a really cool thing, to be honest.
Okay. As a leader, like how would you deal with someone who was slacking? Because for me, when I become a leader, I would want to build a team that's like a championship team, like there's no dead ends, because if you're a dead end, I'm gonna try as much as possible to make you successful. But if I've done everything and you're still a dead end and you're still slacking, I have to like let you go. But obviously, like you didn't have the power to fire someone. Only the owner had the power to like fire someone. So like with someone who was slacking, or even in general too, in leadership, someone who's slacking, how do you think that person should be dealt with?
I mean, I think you should give them like. I think people deserve a chance, but I agree with you. I think like when you're building a team, you are only like it is a cliche, but you are only as strong as like that weakest person, that weakest link, and you want to see everyone pulling in the same direction and pulling together. And like I mean, while I didn't like directly fire people, like I did have a lot of influence on what Joe did, and so I did think about that. I mean, I think like something we talked about. I talked a lot about this with Joe is like clear expectations. So when that person walks in the door, it's not like, oh, you just kind of show up here and do your job, but it's like, this is what we expect. Like for instance, like we expect to be out of here in a half an hour when we're closing, or like when you're like, let's say on prep, I expect this many salads to be made in this amount of time. Like make those expectations clear. When the person doesn't meet those expectations, and also at the same time that you're making the expectations clear, give them the tools to meet those expectations. So give them the quality training, like show them how to do it well. Don't just throw them on there and be like, yeah, figure this out for yourself. Show them how to do it well. Give them the resources, like make them aware of the resources at their disposal, like whether that's like training like on the iPad or like the kind of sheets that show how to do everything or anything that they need. Make sure they have everything they need. That's everything that they reasonably need to fulfill the job well. So once they know those expectations, once they have everything that they need, then the question becomes like, how do they meet those expectations? Let's say once they've learned. So you have to be patient with them because people learn. But I agree, there does come a point I think where, like, you have to say to someone like, maybe this isn't a good fit, because you've given them that chance, you've been patient with them, and I think for me, I'll be honest, like patience is something that I actually struggle with. I struggle to go through that period of, I'm good at like laying out the expectations and giving them the resources, but I'm not so great at being patient and like watching them build and learn. But that is definitely part of what has to happen. And then you kind of see, like either they develop into someone who's an integral part of whatever business or organization you are. It could be a sports team, it could be a business, whatever you're doing. And that's great. They become part of the thing. But I think there are definitely times where you're just like, and they could even be an incredibly like talented or individual or someone who might be good at a particular thing, but they're disruptive in another area. And I think there does come a point where, like, for the sake of, and again, I think this is the thing we got to think about. Don't think about it from your perspective. Think about it from the perspective of the team. Like, are they beneficial to the team as a whole? And I think there definitely comes a time where you kind of have to sit them down and be like, thank you for everything that you've done, but like I don't think like this is not a great fit. And sometimes it's very obvious. They're like a lazy person. They come in and they don't work, and you talk to them. And you're like, these are the expectations. They don't meet the expectations. You talk to them again. They don't meet the expectations, and you're like sorry, like you either work harder or you're not going to work here anymore. Sometimes it's more ambiguous. Maybe they're actually kind of good at something, but maybe in other areas they're not so helpful. So it takes some discernment in that instance. But in general, I think there is definitely a line where you bring the person in and you move on.
Okay. Yeah, I agree too. And I think it was last January you left. It was January 2020, right?
I think it was December 2020, actually.
December 2020. Yeah, okay, you left.
That's right, because I got accepted to Grove and started.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, talk to me. How was college, and how was college different from New York? Because you went to Nassau. Yeah. Then you transferred to Penn. What's it called?
Grove City College.
Grove City College.
Grove City College.
Grove City College.
Yeah.
So, talk to me about the difference between like studying here in New York, studying in college in PA, and like your major and stuff like that, and what you do in college.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently an exercise science major at Grove City. I left Nassau as a bio major. I started off as a biz management major, but I took a different route. Yeah. So the difference is, it's a very different experience. I mean, in so many ways. I mean, Nassau is huge. It's one of the biggest community colleges in the nation. I think it has between 20 and 25,000 students, very large. The college I go to now, I think, has max 3,500 students, so much, much smaller. Mm-hmm. So you're talking smaller class sizes. You're talking a smaller staff to student ratio, and I really love that. Just being like, for instance, like I'm in the exercise science department, and there's there's four now actually, main professors there, and like I know them not like super intimately, but on a personal level. Like they know me, I know them. Like I'm in multiple classes with them, and like I have a relationship with them. So like not only am I learning in class with them, but also like after class I can go up to them and ask them questions about whether it's my own personal life or like things I'm trying out, let's say at the gym or something like that, or whether it's just about some general topic I read about something else or something for another class. And that's really awesome. Like I did have that at Nassau in some instances, but really with community college it's really hit or miss. Like I had some wonderful teachers at Nassau, don't get me wrong, and I also had some teachers who really like it really didn't matter. And also just Nassau's so big that like a lot of teachers know they're never going to see the students ever again, even if it's in your department. Like I took like 101 English. It's a huge class. Yeah. Everyone has to take that, no matter what your major is. And it's like the professor, like there's not worth their while to invest in the students in the same way, just because there's so many, and they're just next semester they're going to teach another huge class with the same amount of students. And so I really enjoy like the smaller, more intimate class setting where I can get to know the professors better. I feel like that's helped me just gain a lot more knowledge more quickly. And it's helped me just to enjoy the major longer. I don't feel, a lot of times at Nassau, I just felt like I was just like one among thousands, just like some like nameless person. Like where I'm at school, like I feel like my professors are really invested in me and really care about my education. And again, I say that like I had some wonderful professors at NASA, don't get me wrong, like two in particular, a really great history professor and an amazing bio professor, which is why I ended up becoming a bio major to begin with and then going on to exercise science. So like, that definitely happens, but like, when you think about the school as a whole, I definitely enjoy the smaller setting and the more intimate setting, and I find that like very beneficial in terms of education.
Okay, that's good. Talk to me about your major, because I think we talked about the study you did this past semester, and we talked about you working with athletes and making them become better performance-wise, even like mental-wise. Yeah, so talk to me about that and how, like what you do and study.
Yeah. So I'm like I said before, I'm an exercise science major. So there's a bunch of different tracks. It can be an undergrad degree for a lot of different things. So like if you want to go into PT, if you want to do OT, if you want to become like a personal trainer, if you want to do physical, if you want to do like athletic training, so there's a lot of things you can do with it. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure what I want to do. Currently, the thing that really interests me is, and this has kind of been growing on me, especially this past semester, is the nutrition aspect of the field. So we learn a lot about things. I mean, like last semester I had a class that was like program development. So we learned about how to develop basically a lifting program for an athlete. Did a project where like we took a decathlete, someone who does a decathlon, and basically like prescribed lifting for them throughout an in-season training block. And that was really cool. Did that a group project. Or then I'm in nutrition classes where I'm learning about like what is beneficial for athletes to eat. So this semester I took a class, nutrition, sport, and exercise. So basically we learned about all the dietary guidelines for like macros and like that athletes have, and like what are the minerals that they need, and vitamins. And so like it's varied a lot, but I really enjoy it because like a lot of it is very applicable to life. Like even in my nutrition classes, like I've walked away and like I eat differently now than I did before I took the class. Or like when I go to the gym, like I'm experimenting with like stuff that I'm learning in class, and I really enjoy that, and that really fascinates me. In terms of the study that I'm doing, it's pretty awesome. So I did independent research this past semester with my advisor, Dr. Jeffrey Buxton. He's one of the exercise science professors, and we're looking at animal flow. So this is pretty interesting. It's basically a new kind of like exercise, basically. And it's actually kind of difficult to describe for those who haven't seen it. It's kind of a cross between, let's say, yoga, like almost like breakdancing, like parkour, gymnastics, and I'm trying to think. I don't know. Those are some of the things that make it up. It was developed very recently. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name who developed it. I can't. It's off the top of my head, but it's pretty interesting. Like you start in like certain positions, and then basically you're transitioning and switching, and there's a lot of stabilization involved, a lot of core, a lot of like being able to extend your limbs out from your center of gravity and be able to hold a position, and then like going back and forth. I mean, the goal is that at the end, like you can do what they call a flow, which is like a continuous stream of these kind of switches and transitions and holds. And yeah, it's actually pretty demanding. I pilot tested the study that we're doing now, and so like I did the workout that we're putting all of our study subjects through, and like I would consider myself generally a pretty fit person. I mean, I usually go to the gym like 5-6 days a week. I'm running, I'm playing sports a lot, and it was challenging for me. I found it very challenging, like sweating hard at the end. It was challenging. Maybe not necessarily in like in ways you would think. It was much more in terms of stability and flexibility and range of motion, that it was challenging, but it's a very interesting kind of exercise.
Do you think this is something that could replace going to the gym completely? Because if you going to the gym, it's very good for you, you're ripping your muscles and they're gonna grow bigger, you're running in the gym, you're doing all these things. So like when you animal flow, like is this something that will change or is so revolutionary that people will stop going to the gym?
At least at this point in time, I don't see it being that. So what we're exploring right now in the study is the caloric output, basically, from doing interval sessions. So just to describe the study for a second, go off on a little bit of a tangent, but I think it'll tie back in. We're putting the subjects, they come in for 3 sessions. They come in for a beginner animal flow workout. So it's like an hour-long workout where basically you start off with just doing like wrist mobilizations and getting flexible, and then you all the way to like at the end for the last 10 minutes, you're doing a flow like I described previously. And then another session, they're coming in and we're taking their heart rate from the animal flow session. So in each section, like we're looking at every 10 to 15 minutes in the animal flow session, and we're taking their heart rate, and we're having them walk at a pace where their heart rate while they're walking is the same as it was in the animal flow session. And again, we're looking at like their VO2 max, their caloric output, same things that we're looking at when we're doing the animal flow session. And then the third time, they just come in and walk and at their own pace, whatever they find comfortable. They literally tell us, like, we put them on a treadmill, we bump it up, we're like, does this feel comfortable? Like, yes, and they just walk for an hour.
Oh.
So we're looking at like, how does animal flow differ from just your average person walking, and like, is the caloric output, like the caloric expenditure, similar to walking? So we haven't really analyzed the data yet, so I don't really have any like conclusions, but we're thinking that potentially it could be. And my professor, Dr. Buxton, again, has already done a study showing that in terms of like flexibility and range of motion and stability, it is highly beneficial. That actually, like, individuals who, I'm trying to remember how many weeks they participated, but they participated in certain workouts each week for a certain number of weeks, and at the end of the weeks they had a greater range of motion and greater flexibility than previously. So it's definitely beneficial in that way. So in terms of like working out, if you want to get big, it's not the answer.
Yeah.
But in terms of like being functional, so like enabling you to do like daily activities, it is very functional. There's a lot of like unilateral stuff, so you're on one leg, which is very functional. Like when you, like for instance, every day you're reaching or you're walking. There's a lot of stability, so a lot of times you're stabilizing, using your core throughout the day, and of course flexibility is helpful throughout activities. And if our study comes to show that the caloric output is similar to walking, with the increased stability, range of motion, flexibility, I think it is definitely something that, like, especially populations like, let's say, more elderly people, they don't necessarily want to go to the gym and pump tons of iron, but they want to be able to burn calories, stay healthy, elevate that heart rate, and also like be benefited in activities of daily living. Maybe not like super elderly people, but like maybe more middle-aged people, it could be beneficial in that sense. But I don't think it's going to replace going to the gym. I think it's more something maybe that could even be supplemental to your gym workout.
Yeah, because I know a lot of athletes who, of course, you see them lifting weights and stuff, but let's say Muhammad Salah, probably LeBron James, they do yoga and like these type of movements that kind of help them be better in their respective sports. And I remember from animal flow, it's called? Yeah, it could probably be something that they could use, I guess, to supplement them. But hopefully this study, because you told me it's a new exercise, right?
Yes, very, very recent. Within the last 5 years, I think it's been developed.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, the listeners should definitely go check it out. They have a whole website.
Yeah.
If you look it up, and you can even view some of the workouts. It's pretty interesting.
Oh,
I'm just gonna say to give it a try if you have the chance.
Perhaps I will, because I don't go to gym like I want to, because I'm either working or
well, that's, yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing about it is it is something that can be done at home. I mean, like we just do it in like a carpeted room with just a video. So like it's very like it's something that can be done in all different places. And like I said, there's many benefits to it, and so it's definitely useful in certain capacities.
Okay. So yeah, I want to circle back to nutrition, because we talk about nutrition, especially like in American culture, where over the past years we see, over probably the past like 30, 40 years, we've seen the rest of fast food, McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco Bell, and you see how a lot of people don't eat right like they should, and obviously they don't have the knowledge like you do. So in school, you go to school, they teach you like, well, you should eat this, not that. But unfortunately, like the masses don't have the same education as you did, so they kind of eat whatever like feels good, So like the Big Mac or the 4x4s, And it's something when I came to the country, I was like, because back home in Nigeria, we usually cook. Then when I came here, I'm like, oh, so people don't cook as much. They usually go out to eat and stuff, and the things they're eating are not that good. And I think we had a conversation about how like people eat and how it's contributing to like heart disease and obesity. Yeah. So yeah, talk to me, like, why do people eat the way they're doing even though so unhealthy, and like how should they change it?
Well, that's a very complicated question. So yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious if you look around that we have like a chronic disease epidemic. So we have like super high rates, higher than probably at any point in the history of humanity, of things like blood pressure and like instances of cardiovascular disease and all kinds of stuff. It's rampant in our culture. So many people are on medication for these things, and so many people die of things like heart attacks and strokes all the time.
Yeah, it's odd.
And so, I mean, I think it should raise the question, like like we should pull all the stops and be thinking about all the causes. And a lot of the ways that we deal with a lot of these things is medication. So like we think, for instance, like an example is like a lot of people are on statins. So statins are actually the I think most widely prescribed medication ever. And if you know what a statin is, it's something that basically stops you from releasing like cholesterol in your body, because some people still believe that cholesterol is something that can cause heart disease. Or we attack it in other areas. People take a huge variety of medication. And I took a very interesting class this past semester called Nutrition and Health, and my professor was really talking about just approaching these things differently and thinking about how diet could affect these things. And if you go back in the history of basically nutrition science, the way we eat today is really dictated by a guy named Ancel Keys. So in I want to say the 1950s and 60s, there were a decent amount of people who have heart disease, and people wanted to look into a solution. Why do people have heart disease? Why are people suffering from strokes and heart attacks? It wasn't even close to as many strokes and heart attacks as we have today, not even close. But still, people were concerned about it. So people looked into it. And this guy, Ancel Keys, he came up with something called the diet-heart hypothesis. Basically, this has gone under, it's changed and morphed a little bit. But initially, he basically said that fat is dietary fat is what causes people to have heart disease. So initially he said saturated fats. So saturated fats are like animal fats, things like you get saturated fat if you eat things like bacon, if you eat things like eggs, if you eat things like chicken, whatever it is. He said, but specifically red meat is high in saturated fat. And he basically said we should cut saturated fat out of our diet. He did a study called the 7-country study where he showed a direct correlation between dietary intake of saturated fat and basically, I think it was cardiovascular disease. That study had a lot of problems with it, both in terms of conflict of interest and in terms of the countries he selected and many other things. It was not reliable. But he was a very pushy individual, for lack of a better word. He was very good at putting forth his ideas. He did some other studies. Again, most of them are questionable. But his idea, basically, he wormed his way into committees and onto boards of organizations like the American Heart Association and government committees. And so I think in the late 70s, the government actually put together a congressional committee to look at dietary, what was going on in the U.S. dietarily, and he was part of that committee. They wrote up a report, and basically the guy who wrote up the report consulted heavily with a Harvard professor who was a proponent of the diet-heart hypothesis. And so basically the idea has come down, and I don't think everyone thinks like this today. It's starting to change now, but basically that we should eat a diet very low in fat, and that means, because you still have to consume calories, obviously, that has meant an upswing in the amount of carbohydrates you eat, because you have 3 macros. You have proteins, you have fat, you have carbohydrates. So you can eat more protein, but what's actually happened is that as they encouraged fat to be decreased, the carbohydrate consumption went up. And as food has become more highly processed, and Americans eat more and more carbohydrates, that has led to something called hyperglycemia, which is basically your blood glucose levels are continually elevated. And this comes from something called insulin resistance, which is basically insulin is the hormone that allows you to take glucose into your cells and to use it. And because we overstimulate it, we can no longer do that. And so that hyperinsulinemia and this insulin resistance, I would really say is the underlying issue with the chronic disease epidemic we have today. I mean, it's the reason why people are overweight. It's the reason why people, they have so many comorbidities. They have cardiovascular disease. They have heart disease. They're on medication all the time. Is really a result of the fact that we eat a diet high in sugar and highly processed carbohydrates, and also we eat so often. In past cultures, people ate maybe the 3 meals, or I don't even know. I mean, it really depends on the culture, but today we eat all the time. We eat 3 meals, we snack, we're always drinking things like sweet coffee, soda, all the time, in between meals, and that just exacerbates the problem and makes it worse. And so I would really I've been thinking about this in my own diet recently. It's I'm trying to eat less carbohydrates and more fat, because actually, despite what Ancel Keys said, his research was not reliable. And actually, other people have done other research, and they've actually shown that actually a diet high in animal products is actually better for you. And I can go into some of that if you'd like, or if you'd like to discuss something else, we can also go there.
Yeah, well, how was there a conflict of interest in his study of the 7 countries?
Well, he was really looking for, so when you would do a study, you want to set it up so that there is every possibility that you might be proved wrong, correct?
Yeah.
So like if your theory is correct, it will be proved correct, right? But you want to test the limits of your theory to show that it's basically foolproof, right? You want to do everything possible to set up your experiment so that it tests your theory to the max. So that if your theory is proved right in the experiment, then it's really right. It's not you kind of like only put like a straw man test or a real weak test. Yeah. Well, that's basically what the 7 country study was. He didn't select certain, he selected certain countries that he thought would be advantageous to his view. Yeah. And, in fact, most of his research, he came in with the premise, not that, hey, my view could be wrong, but hey, my view is right. Yeah. Let me prove that my view is right. So he set up most of his experiments to prove that he was right, rather than to test his theory to the max to prove that it was wrong. And so other people have done other research. So like, I'll quickly talk about 2 studies. In the early 1900s, there's a guy named Stefanson who actually, he went and visited the Inuit. So there are a people group who lives in the far north, in northern Canada and like Alaska, and they primarily eat meat because obviously up there it's really cold. They don't really there's not a lot of fruits and vegetables just everywhere. Yeah. In fact, they actually said, like he talked with people, they associate eating vegetables with starvation. They only did that in times of starvation. They actually followed these caribou herds and they would eat the caribou, but they would eat the entire caribou. So we go to the store, we get a steak, we get a ham, whatever. They would eat everything, the brains, the liver, all that stuff. They kill caribou and they eat the entire thing. And he looked at them, and if Ansel Keys had been right, these people should have been so unhealthy, right? They're eating tons of saturated fat and animal fat, right? All the time. They should have all been dropping dead of heart disease, and they were in amazing health, great teeth, amazing health, and almost no instances of cardiovascular disease or high blood pressure. And he did all this research. He looked at hundreds of subjects and took all these measurements, and he found this out. And he even wanted to test it out himself. So he actually came back, and I think in the 1920s, him and a friend were like, we're going to test this out. So they did a diet. I think for, I want to say, was it a year or 2 years? They only ate meat. They ate meat and they drank water for over a year, I think. Okay. And at the end, and they basically they did a checkup with the doctor before and a checkup with the doctor afterwards. They monitored all this stuff. They were in perfect health at the end of the diet, perfect health.
Only eating meat.
Only eating meat.
And
drinking water.
That's interesting because we see this movement of veganism or vegetarian where people are moving from meat just to eat plants or no meat products. So do you think that's is the wrong way to go? Because people they have their own reasons of not eating meat, whether it be animal cruelty or just because they believe that research has proven that eating plants makes them more healthy and stuff like that.
I think there's a couple of things. I think some people do it for religious reasons, and that makes sense. And people do it for reasons like you're talking about with animal cruelty. And I think those are legitimate concerns. There's definitely problems with the way the animals are treated in the food industry. I won't get into all the details, but there's no question that there's cruelty going on. And I think those are legitimate concerns. I would question sometimes maybe the way we deal with those concerns. And I think there are ways in which you can purchase meat and be sure that that's not happening. And so I would say that I'm personally not a vegan or vegetarian. The big thing is with vegans and vegetarians, it's not terrible for you. In fact, a lot of people do amazing stuff with that because and they're very health conscious and they take care of themselves, and it can work. The problem is that it's just a lot harder to get the amount of protein you need from eating a vegan diet, especially, and the amount of and even a lot of, so for instance, there's when I talk about vitamins and minerals, we talk about something called bioavailability, right? And that's the ease with which your body can process those when you eat the food, right? So actually, the most bioavailable sources of a lot of vitamins and minerals are actually found in animal food, surprisingly. Right. So for instance, there's certain vitamins, they actually have an animal and a plant form. You can eat either, but the animal form is much more easy for the body to digest and process than the plant form. And also, almost all forms, all meat are complete protein. So when we think about proteins, also a complete protein is one that that has all your essential amino acids. So you have essential and you have non-essential amino acids, right? Non-essential your body can produce, but essential you must take in from your diet. Almost all meat that you eat, especially red meat, is a complete protein source. So you're getting all the essential amino acids. Now, plant sources of protein are not. So you must be very careful when you eat those kind of diets to make sure that you basically have to overlap your food.
All right, so yeah, talk to me about the plants versus the meat. How plants don't have as much or the same proteins as meat does.
Yeah. Vegans and vegetarians have to be very careful about overlapping what the protein sources that they're eating, because those plant protein sources are not complete sources of protein. They have to make sure they're getting all their amino acids. So let's say one protein source doesn't have a certain amino acid, they need to make sure that as they're eating another protein source with that amino acid. So you have to have a lot more intentionality about it. Of course, obviously it can be done, and I think it can be very helpful. But yeah, you have to have a lot of intentionality about it, and especially if you're an athlete eating that kind of diet, it can be very challenging because there's just, with that, athletes especially need a lot of protein in their diet. They need a lot of amino acids so that they can repair their muscles and things like that, and yeah, it can be very challenging. But I think, I looked at a study this past semester as I was doing a project, and it compared basically the average omnivorous diet that, let's say the average person eats, and then vegan, and then vegetarian, and then pesco-vegetarian diets. So basically they're eating fish, the vegetarian eats fish,
why not meat,
and stuff like that. And actually the pesco-vegetarian diets, the diets where they're eating basically fish or stuff like that along with the vegetarian diet, actually scored very high on a healthy eating index. And so that can be very good, because those fish are good sources of protein and a lot of vitamins and minerals as well. So it's an interesting thing. I think it's definitely, there is no, one thing I can't stress enough is there's no one size fits all with diet. That is the problem with something like the diet hypothesis that I explained before, where they said basically everyone should cut fat out of their diet. That is not, it's especially bad for people like children and other things like that and stuff like that. There is no one size fits all with a diet. Every diet really should be individualized to the person that's doing it, and everyone has different needs. And so there are people that vegetarian diets works for, and they're very intentional about it, and they get the protein that they need, and that's great. And there's people it doesn't work for, and they eat an omnivorous diet, or some people eat a high-fat diet, and that works for them, and that's great. There is no one-size-fits-all thing when it comes to diet.
Okay, you say there's no one-size-fits-all, so how does a specific person know what specific diets fits them?
I think it's hard to tell. It's definitely something I need to do more research into. I think you can. We on the way here we were just talking about the educational resources at our disposal, and there's definitely no lack of, you can explore what diet could be helpful. I think a lot of it is determined by health, and also lifestyle. I talked about athletes. Are you an athlete? Well, that will play a part in your diet. Are you someone who's more sedentary and is at home? Well, that should play a part in what you eat. Are you someone who's always traveling? That'll play a part in the kind of diet you do. For instance, I do right now, I'm doing intermittent fasting. Well, that might be helpful to someone who travels all the time. They might not have to eat, they don't have to eat as many meals. They can stay healthy. They can actually, they can tap into their fat stores and be burning those, and they can still function just fine. So it's really, I think, lifestyle and stuff plays a huge part in it.
Yeah. So it's basically do your own research and see what works for you, right?
Yeah, and consult with people who are knowledgeable. I consult with my professors when I think about stuff like that, and there are resources available, and there are a lot of good dietitians out there as well. I think consult with what's knowledgeable. I think I would just say, as a rule though, the less highly processed carbohydrates you eat, the better. I think that has really been the plague of the Western kind of diet in the last 30 or 40 years, and that's really the reason why we have such a chronic disease epidemic.
Yeah, that's great, and it's been exacerbated by the pandemic, that started in 2020, and a lot of people. I believe there's a study that COVID usually targets people who have a lot of fat in their body, and you're more likely to perish because of that. So I want to talk about how people eat and how has COVID affected people especially Americans, because I believe we're #1 with the highest tally of deaths and infections in the whole entire world. So I want to talk about COVID and in general, what do you recommend for people to do during these times, like naturally wise, at home before going to the doctor and stuff, to prevent themselves from? I know we're not. Well, so we're not doctors. I'm not gonna say that, but it's good to like look at things from the outside perspective instead of just listening to doctors and scientists all the time. So what do you think the solution is? Because a lot of people say work out, a lot of people say eat well, a lot of people say, just take the vaccine and you're good. So what do you learn all that?
I think, I mean, there is no question that there's actually studies that have shown that actually being like literally your fat, like the more overweight you are, the more at risk you are from dying from COVID. And there's a reason. I don't know all the ins and outs of the biology, but that actually like extra fat cells actually like help the virus like in its like basically its conquest of your body. And so I think that is helpful. And also, I mean, making sure you're getting the correct amount of, you know, vitamins and minerals is also essential. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say like, you know, getting the correct amount of things like vitamin D and vitamin C. I mean, those are very helpful. I mean, vitamin C is a very powerful antioxidant. Vitamin E is also a very powerful antioxidant. So, so those things are definitely important. I think I've talked to you about this before. You listened to the Joe Rogan podcast at all? Yeah, so he did a really interesting interview, and I recommend it to all the listeners highly, with Dr. Peter Mccullough. So he's a doctor based in, I believe, outside Dallas, in
Texas.
And very educated guy. He's actually a trained epidemiologist, and that's one of his specialties. And he also specializes in cardiovascular conditions. And really great interview. It was like a 3-hour long interview, and he just has so much wisdom to say about COVID and the way we think about it. And he really points out that he thinks that there's almost this mass psychosis that's happened with the vaccine, that we think the vaccine is kind of the one-size-fits-all solution, and that if you take the vaccine, you'll be good. And it's just, while the vaccine is obviously not bad, I wouldn't say that. I mean, and I think it's probably been responsible for saving hundreds of thousands of lives, and that's good. The vaccine is not the only thing, and he really puts forward, he asked the question, like, why are we not treating COVID at home before people come into the hospital? Like, right now, we're just shooting them up with the vaccine, or even, like, if they get sick, they come to the hospital, like, once they've had symptoms over a course of, like, let's say, like, a week or 10 days or maybe two weeks. He's like, we could be treating this at home. There are certain drugs, and I know, like, Trump came out and talked about hydroxychloroquine, was kind of demonized for it, and he talked about it as more of a solution to the problem. It's not like a huge, necessarily like the blanket solution, but he talks about that, and there's some other drugs that you can take at home that actually slow the polymerase, the thing that helps the virus replicate within your cells. They can slow the virus's progress in your cells. They could actually like help you heal from COVID if you started, if as soon as you started feeling a little sick, you were able to take things like these. And these are things that have actually, like, they're not like new drugs or something. They're actually, they've been legalized over the counter to treat other things. A lot of them are like anti-malarial drugs, and so he's really advocating that we start treating, like, we make these things available to people, and we start treating COVID when people like are first at home, because like, he makes the point when they come into the hospital like 7-10 days later, the virus has already replicated. It's done replicating, and they have to deal with the consequences of it. And we can put them on a ventilator, but that only does so much. And even with the vaccine, people are still getting sick. And so, like, if people had resources available at their home, if we had a plan to treat people at their home, then a lot of he argues that millions of deaths could have been prevented if people had treated at home before waiting 10 days, 2 weeks to come into the hospital. I don't know all the ins and outs of the science. He is definitely, I mean, you can look at his credentials. He knows what he's talking about. There's no question about that. And I definitely advise our listeners to listen to that because he has a lot of wisdom. And so, I mean, my take on COVID is kind of like, I think there's no question that a healthy lifestyle helps you fight COVID, without question. Healthy lifestyle in terms of the way you eat, in terms of the way you exercise. Mm-hmm. Like, you are doing yourself a disservice when it comes to fighting COVID if you're just sitting inside, not exercising, and not thinking about the way you eat. And if you think that the vaccine is just the solution where you're just going to get the shot and you're going to be fine, I would warn against something like that. Yeah,
I think ever since the start of this pandemic and all this, it's really exposed a lot about society and opened a lot of questions about government overreach, questions about, you know, the legitimacy of vaccines. So many things have been exposed. Even like, I think I read some news story yesterday how in New York they're accepting people of a like certain race when it comes to, you know, treating vaccines. And I also, like, on Twitter, I saw a question, or some people were like questioning whether if if you're unvaccinated, whether you should wait in line to get treatment. Well, it's kind of like, well, since you get a vaccine, you kind of did it to yourself, so just go back out there. So there's a lot of groups have been demonized because of this pandemic, and a lot of things I've been thinking about this too, like about government overreach. And in an ideal society where you want government to be your friend and you should trust government, unfortunately, that's not the way it is, because people with power, people who are in power, don't have the best intent most of the time. And that's why I think people should do their research themselves, you can't listen to this one source or this two sources, because you never know what they have in their mind for you. That's why I really believe, like, do your independent research, see what like caters to you, and even sometimes question your own premises or your hypothesis about the way things go. But I think this pandemic it's affected a lot of things, and it's opened up like a kind of Pandora box of how should we deal with this. Because I talked about this last week. Let's start with government overreach. A lot of people saying, well, the government should do all they can to make sure everyone's vaccinated. But I don't think it's ever going to happen. 100%. I don't think 100% of people are vaccinated from polio or like from all these other diseases. You can't vaccinate the whole world's population. That's over 7 billion people. Then, here in this country, we have over 300 million people. So somehow, some way, you cannot vaccinate everybody and make sure that everyone's protected against it. So I've been thinking a lot about government overreach, because a lot of people were like, I don't think government should tell me where I should put my body. This is my body, my choice, all that. Like, especially from the right. And left is like, well, listen, the vaccine works, do this, just vaccinate it, do your own part, and everything will be fine. But the thing is, it's really a pros and cons. If the government does make hypothetically 100% of people get vaccinated, it opens up a new power. This is power they could use over and over again. And sometimes it could be for your best interest, or sometimes it can't be for your best interest. I think the government before they did a study where they infected people with syphilis. I forgot what it's called.
The Tuskegee
experiments,
study,
yeah. So a lot of people are, going back towards that, especially people like minorities, like Black and Hispanics. I'm like, wait, the government has done this before, so I'm kind of not trusting the government in doing this. So yeah, I just want to ask about your opinion, because it's really a Pandora box. If the government has this power to make everyone get vaccinated, this is power that's going to lead to new things. A lot of people saying vaccine passports. If you don't do this or that, you can't shop. The lefts are like, well, you should take your vaccine, and yeah, I'm going with this. But like right wingers are kind of pushing back against the government like always. But isn't that resulting to more deaths? But the lefts are like, well, the government should do their own part and make sure that we're protecting every single person from dying from this disease. But then that leaves government's power unchecked. So what's your opinion?
Yeah, so when it comes to thinking about government overreach, it is a very difficult question. I think without question, our founding fathers would probably be appalled by the government reach.
They'll be appalled by a lot of things.
And yes, absolutely. But that specifically, I mean, I think, and here I speak, I'm not just talking about the left, I'm talking about the right too. I mean, long ago, the right departed from the kind of small government model, and they're about just as big government as the left. They just would like to impose different things on people.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and it is different. That is a generalization, of course. But like, generally, we are so accepting of a government that like just has its fingers in like our lives all the time. And the idea of the founding fathers, from what I've read of people like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and John Adams, is that like they saw the federal government as something that's necessary to like represent our country to other countries and to do other things like protecting our nation, but they did not see it as something that should have its hands in every private person's life. I mean, really, they set up our system of government so that the federal government does what it has to do. The states then govern the people within the states, but I don't think they would have. I think they would be turning in their graves to think about all the things that the government now does to the private citizen on our everyday lives. And I tend, while I don't agree with all of the ideals of the founding fathers, I tend to agree with them on that. I mean, I think that the average everyday person should be able to live their life and make their choices as an individual. The government should not necessarily be dictating to them what should happen. Now, the question of public health is raised, but like I said, like we've talked about previously, we talked about COVID. There are different views on the vaccine. I mean, like the gentleman, Peter Mccullough, who I mentioned, he says, I mean, after 6 months, apparently immunity, he claims immunity drops from 80% all the way down to 20%. And
After you take the vaccine?
After 6 months after you take the vaccine, that's why you need a booster shot now. And it's like, and at the same time, like all these big pharmacy companies are vested in the vaccine, so they're collaborating with the government. There's a conflict of interest. So it's like, it's not as simple as this is the answer to the problem, here it is, why are you refusing to take it? It's much more complex than that. And you have to respect people's right to say, I don't choose to take the vaccine. I mean, I think what Bill de Blasio has done in New York City is despicable. You can't tell people they can't go out in public if they don't have the vaccine. That's their choice. Like, you can encourage them to do it, but you shouldn't have to force that on them. I mean, like, ultimately at the end of the day, it's up to them, just like every other decision. And the scary thing is that, like, think about it. Like, I mean, you brought this up. If the government can tell everyone to get the vaccine shot, what can't they tell people to do? I mean, I think it's attributed to Thomas Jefferson, although I'm not sure that he actually said it. But he said something like, there's a quote along the lines of, like, any government powerful enough to protect you from anything is also powerful enough to take everything from you. And it's true. I mean, like, what next are they going to tell people? I mean, what's going to stop them from, like, let's say, like, abolishing our freedom of religion or abolishing the right to carry arms or things like that, if they can do that? And so, like, people are consenting to all this because they're terrified. But I think it's scary. You got to think about the consequences down the road. I mean, there's another quote. I don't know who said it, but he basically said, like, nothing is as permanent as a temporary government program. So, like, once the government takes power, they're not giving it back. That's not how it works.
Yeah, that's why you got to be careful.
And also, you're crazy if you think the government has your best interests at heart. Those politicians that sit in Washington, they have their best interests at heart. I mean, we talked about leadership earlier on, and what servant leadership looks like. I don't know, like, all of them personally, but, like, from what you see, like, it's like they're worried about getting elected to their next term, right? They're worried about their political career. They're not worried about your individual life.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's like, I find it terrifying to think about putting my wealth, like, letting people like that who are sitting there who have no idea who I am dictate every aspect of my life. To me, that's terrifying. And so I would say, like, I'm not like, I don't think it's bad to get the vaccine. I personally haven't chosen to get it. And that's my personal choice, and I think that should be respected. I can respect somebody else's choice to get it. That's their that's their choice. That's fine. Like, either way, it's like, I think we should be careful of other people. I'm not saying this because I think that, like, we should just, like, let COVID run rampant. I mean, I think it is a serious thing. I mean, like, right now I have a friend whose mom is seriously sick with COVID. And so I think we should we should take steps to protect people who are vulnerable, especially the elderly and those who are immune compromised. Yeah. But, like, at the same time, like, I don't think, like, we should let our fear drive us to the point where, like, basically, like, the government is running our lives. I think that is a scary place to be honest.
Yeah, I saw this meme, and it was like, they found this in 2021 or 2022, and they were like, you freed the what? You know, because how they had slaves and stuff, and, like, Emancipation Proclamation and stuff, that was something else.
And even if you think about, like, the vaccine, and even if I don't think there's any malicious intent with the vaccine, but there's no question that this vaccine has been rushed out to fix the problem with COVID. How do we know that they know all the long-term effects of the vaccine? Like, how do we know that, like, people who take it aren't going to, like, in years, like, down the road, that, like, there's not going to be issues with it, or that it's not going to have side effects that they don't know about right now? And I'm not trying to scare anyone, but I think, like, you have to let people think about those kind of things and make their choice. If they're worried, like, and you need to respect people's choice. Like, it's not like the vaccine is something that is 100% pro and there's no cons to it. There are cons to it. There are. I mean, like, Peter Mccullough talks about in that same interview, he talks about the fact that, like, actually for people who have already had COVID, the vaccine can actually, like, have, like, negative effects. And so it's not actually helpful even for those people. And so, like, it's not, like, it is not, like, the be-all, end-all solution. And so I really think it should be up to people on an individual basis to take it.
I do think people should question. I always say people should question authority and question, you know, people who tell you to do things, just because sometimes you never really know what they have in their mind, whether it's for their best interest or not. For example, like, let's say financial incentives, because these vaccines were provided by private companies, and for a company to survive, you need to have money. So if I'm a company and I have a vaccine, why wouldn't I be pushing it out or do marketing campaigns to push this vaccine out? So I'm just saying, it's not like don't get the vaccine or, like, you know, just get COVID or, you know, go without mask or anything. But I'm just saying that people should question a lot of things. I don't like when people are sheep and they just like go
Yes.
along, and because sometimes the government, your government, unless like it's your parents, they don't have your best interest. But like the government for sure doesn't have your best interest. They really don't care. Most of them only care about getting reelected. And but the thing is about like in this point in time, I do think history is gonna judge us, whether bad or good. For example, I told you about habeas corpus. To jail anyone who were dissenters or who supported the South, to make sure that the North won the war and make sure that this was a perfect union as he saw in his eyes. And there are examples of government overreach there. Freedom of speech was taken away. Like if you're supporting the South or supporting slavery, you were gonna get jailed. So I'm thinking, like, is there moments where government overreach is necessary to keep people safe? And is that you could use that in this moment? Is government overreach needed to keep people safe from COVID? From take the vaccines, mask up, do this and that. So what's your opinion on that? Because history did judge him. Like a lot of people, I think people make the mistake of looking at history so in a simple way. It's very nuanced. For example, if the South won the war, Abraham Lincoln would not be deemed as a hero, or he would probably have been hanged, and the South would control the narrative that we won the war. This was what it was because of. So I'm like imagine if how things flipped, how history would have judged them. I'm so like thankful that the North won the war, and Emancipation Proclamation would free the slaves and stuff like that. And history would judge Abraham Lincoln like, wow, he's such a good president. He really ahead of his time and stuff like that. So I wonder if 50, 100, 200 years from now, I wonder how people are going to look back at this. Either the people are going to look back at it like, damn, really the government just took their rights like that and they didn't even fight back. They just sat down. Or people might say, oh, how dumb are they? Like the vaccine works, so obviously why didn't they take that? So there's something, like some things we can't control. Like we think we're right. For example, like Robert E. Lee in the Civil War thought he was right.
Yeah.
George Washington thought he was right. And he did win the war. So yeah, I really wonder, like history really judges people without their control, because we think we're right, but then in 50 years or 100 years or 200 years, people are going to look back at us and say, wow, you were off.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very easy to look back at history and look at the consequences and be like, oh, that was a good decision, oh, that wasn't. Like, and you're 100% right. Like, if Abraham had suspended that and then lost the war, people would have been like, oh, like
dictator.
And so there is a line. I don't think I really know where that line is. I just think whenever that happens, we should be wary of those things, because of what I said earlier, a government that's big enough to tell you that to do that and to protect you can also do that to your take everything that you think is important. And the question then becomes is the government the question comes down to it, do you trust the government? Is the government right? Is the government wrong? I mean, the government's made up of fallible people, whether it's a fallible king or whether it's a fallible House of Representatives or a fallible Senate. Those people are fallible. They don't always make the right choices. And so I think we should be wary of just giving those people just power over our lives. And I think I do believe in the individuals. And I'm not saying that I think the individual necessarily makes better choices than those people, because the individual is also a fallible person. Yeah. But I think the right of the individual to make those choices should be respected. And I think we can take a silly example, the law to wear your seatbelt, right? I even question that law, not because I think it's bad to wear your seatbelt, but because why should the government be telling me to wear my seatbelt? If I'm going to go out and do something stupid and not wear my seatbelt, that's my choice, right?
Yeah, isn't the government's job to protect the people?
Yes, it is to protect us, but the thing is when does that protection stop and invasion begin? I don't know, I'm not against a seatbelt law, and I think that is probably a good thing. But I'm just giving a silly example. But you have to draw the line somewhere. Do you want when are you going to say no to the government and be like, yeah, that's too far? And the times like this is especially dangerous because people are scared, and when people are scared, they act like sheep and they just do whatever they're told, and they just they're willing to just basically give all their freedom to the government, and that stuff's not coming back. It doesn't come back. The government won't be after COVID. We'll be you gave us all our freedom, you gave us all this power during COVID. We're going to give this all back to you. That's not how it works. No, it's not coming back. It doesn't come back across the table. And so it's scary to me how many people, because they're so terrified of COVID, are willing to basically, I think this could have a drastic effect on like the future of our country, to be honest, and the way we think about government and like you're saying government overreach. Because what's going to happen when the government tries to do something else in years go past and people are going to be like, well, back during COVID, the government did that, so it must be okay.
That's true. I do think, as I said, people should question motives and they should not.
Yes.
They shouldn't just go like sheep and
We should all, and this is the problem. Everyone should be able to think for themselves.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean everyone's going to come up with the right conclusions, but you should have logical reasons for believing what you believe and for voting who you're voting for doing what you're doing. And those reasons should not be dictated by things like your emotions all the time. Emotions aren't bad. Like having your life run by your fear or this or that is a scary thing because it leads you to do things that aren't helpful in the long run.
Yeah, like something you said about people with fear and how they tend to act like sheep. I think after 9/11, there was the Patriot Act, which sought to monitor and to people who were deemed terrorists by the United States government. And the whole thing added up to Edward Snowden exposing governments and how they spy on its citizens and stuff like that. Yeah. So people, history right now, looking back at it, is saying, well, you shouldn't have said yes to the Patriot Act because how the government is basically the powers expanded and they could spy on anyone. NSA, CIA, FBI, they could spy on anyone who they deem a terrorist. And sometimes you're not a terrorist, just like, well, we deem you a terrorist, so we're gonna spy on you. Yeah. So I do think, in an ideal society, I do think government should push for people to trust them. But then we have to be wary. Yeah, we have to kind of question the motives and because you can't say government is the power be all or just take everything from me just for my safety. I think you should definitely be wary of their intentions because there are some people who power gets to the head and like, I just want to get reelected. So I'll lie to my people, I'll do this and that, I'll divide them up just for me to get reelected. So I don't know, but I also have a relationship between government and the people.
Yeah, and it's hard because there's been so many different kinds and forms of government, and to be honest, I still am not sure that what the best form is. I think our form of government here in the United States is a great thing, and it was made kind of to combat the evils of something like a monarchy or something like that. But I actually think if you have a good monarch, there's actually a lot of pros to a monarchy that we don't have in our country. But also, if you have a bad monarch, that it can just go so far down that it can be bad. So it is challenging. It's hard to know how the government should relate to people because I think a society without government is not a good. It couldn't function, and it's we need government, but the question is what kind of government do we need?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
And we also have to just realize that government is fallible, and like you're saying, I don't think we have to be 100% skeptical, but we do need to question and think about things. And it really bothers me when I see people, and I especially see this with COVID, who just believe whatever's on their television or whatever President Biden gets up and says. And it's like, those people, since when did you think that those people had your best interests at heart, that they know who you are, and that they're telling you the truth all the time? People, this is a world full of people who are people are not there's a lot, people all make mistakes. We're all fallible.
That's true.
And some people go beyond making mistakes to outright lying. So it's you can't 100% believe everything that's presented to you as truth. You need to question, you need to go, you need to
do your own research.
Test it. Doing
research, which unfortunately a lot of people don't do. So it's easier for someone to
it's
tell you
lazy.
what to do.
It's lazy,
and I'll do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because as you said, there are a lot of people say democracy, but there's also there's some pros to being a dictator because, or having a one-party system because you get things done like this.
Yes.
Unlike here, we have
the problem though is then who, and at the end of the day, it all comes down to the fact that who's holding that accountable. The scary thing about government is in some places no one holds the government accountable. So when you have the one-party system, no one's going to stop. The thing about the two-party system is that they can kind of hold each other accountable to some sense. If you have a king, nobody's holding him accountable. He can do whatever he wants, and he's the one who kind of determines what's good and what's not for the people, and that's a scary thing.
Yeah. So I've also what should be the relationship between government and people? Because when I listen to Milton Friedman, he's an economist, he's a libertarian, and obviously libertarians believe that governments should, I think, only federal defense and something taxing, but then that's it. Everything else, give it to the private sector. But at the same time, if you give it to the private sector, they have their own financial incentives. Example, the vaccine, and it's we're gonna mass produce, gonna make the vaccine fast, and we're gonna ship it. We're gonna sell it as fast as possible to make money because that's how our company is gonna survive. So a lot of times it's okay, government, they don't have your best interest. But sometimes the private sector is not gonna have your best interest too,
No.
because it's only run by money, you know? So it's like, a lot of people always seek to seek perfection, but like there's always pros and cons with everything else. In a government, in a country where the government is running most of the things, I think there's a little less financial incentive.
Yeah.
Because government, it's our money. We're gonna like, you know, like a lot of people make jokes about Congress, like they spend money like they have
Yeah.
infinite amounts of money.
It's easy to spend other people's money.
Exactly. Or let's say if companies are running things, well, companies want money too, and they're gonna like they're gonna exploit the workers and like, you know, get all the money as much as possible. So it's like you have to choose. There has to be a balance, and that's why left and right. That's where it comes from. Like in which way should governments be involved in our lives and which way it shouldn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a whole lot of it's a whole issue. Like it's something that I don't think we're ever gonna find an answer to. There's always gonna be pros and cons, and people are not gonna like this, but people are not gonna like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll ever perfectly find the balance because we're not perfect people. But I agree with you. Out there is some balance where, like, because I agree, like, especially in a capitalist economy, like, just like the leaders are fallible, people are fallible, and they're going to go for what's best for them. And so there is a sense in which the government needs to hold big companies in check from exploiting people. I don't think that's wrong. And, like, I would even say, like, we talked about Abraham Lincoln, like, I would say that if you look like Abraham Lincoln overstepped his power, but I would say that was for a good cause. Like, I'm very thankful that he did that because it enables like the Emancipation Proclamation and us to have the country we do today. And so, can you justify that? Do the ends justify the means?
Yeah.
I don't know. What are the ends? Who decides whether the ends are the right thing?
And
There's a lot of questions.
And it's history that is going to judge everybody, regardless.
Yes.
A lot of people like, they're like, oh, he was bad, this and that. But I'm like, he thought that he was fighting for the right reason.
Yeah.
You know, like people who in the South who were fighting, they thought they were fighting for the right reason. They weren't like, oh, I'm gonna wake up and become a bad guy today. Because the world is more nuanced than people think. There's no bad and good.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks they're good. It's just that if you win the war, you get to write the narrative. Like, this is why I did this. And since you won, people are gonna like, oh, okay.
So here's a question though. Like, if we think about this, like, you say everyone thinks that they're doing good, but then the question becomes, and we're getting into something more complicated here, like, what is good? Like, what determines what is good? Because, like, you're right. People in the South didn't wake up and were like, yeah, we'll be on the bad guy side today. Like, they thought there was, I mean, like, I'm sure there were people who didn't have the best motives, without question, but there were also people who thought that they were fighting for what was right. So the question then becomes, like, who is the arbiter of what is a good outcome and what's not?
That is true.
That's the question.
No one knows. It's just that.
I mean, to say something like I would say that, like, there is an answer to that question, and I think this is interesting when you think about things like religion and having a moral standard and a moral code, because there is something out there written on all of our hearts where we know to some extent what is right and what is wrong, but that's a very complicated question.
It is I think good and bad is determined by our perceptions of the world. For like example, I heard this quote, like, someone's terrorist is someone else's freedom fighter. So someone brands this person as a terrorist. For example, let's say George Washington was a terrorist because under the British Empire, he sought to secede and leave. And if he didn't win the war, history would have judged him as a bad person. Like, look, what are you trying to do? Like, this great empire is protecting you and everything, and you're trying to secede. It brings up the whole conversation of taxing and how we're not represented in parliaments. But yeah, I don't think no one knows. Like, Osama bin Laden, he probably thought he was a good person, or I'm doing this necessary evil to protect my country and stuff. But like, look, you are a bad person. You did kill a lot of people.
The question then becomes, what is the basis for our judicial standards? Because because if nobody knows what's good and what's bad, then no one can pass judgment on anybody else, because it's all a matter of perspective and basically social construct, right? But we do pass judgment on other people. We have things like juries, we have things like judges. So what is the basis for that if nobody knows? That would be my question.
I have no idea. So let's say you kill somebody, like, obviously a whole of society is going to think that you did something bad, but the murderer might have a good reason of why he did it, but like, no one's going to believe you, and the jury is probably going to find you guilty and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so why does the whole jury, is it just because they've been raised in a society where murder is presented to them as something that's bad?
I think so. Yeah.
See, I would disagree with that, but that's an interesting idea.
Why would you disagree with that?
So, I mean, I'm a Christian, so I believe that there is a God, and that God has given us a moral standard, so that there are things, and there is in a sense in which we can go against that moral standard to an extent. I mean, I've said a lot throughout this episode that like people are broken. I mean, I believe that all people are sinners in a sense that they're all broken,
imperfect,
and so we don't follow that moral standard. But in some sense, there is a law written on all of our hearts. I mean, I think there's a reason why we're all like. Generally, and there are exceptions, but people who have kind of destroyed themselves so much that they find things like murder like not to be a problem. But in general, we all view murder as something wrong. There's a reason why for hundreds of years, like since the beginning of humanity, people have like, bar a few societies, murder has been viewed as something that's wrong, or like think about other things. And so like, yes, there are twisted societies where like they have human sacrifice and things like that. Don't get me wrong, and I think that just shows the depth of depravity of human nature. But I would argue that like I think that there is a moral standard. I think that that's like what our judicial system, in a very loose way, is based off of, and that there is something that we can hold each other accountable to, and that's something that is given to us by God, which is a moral standard.
That's interesting because a lot of people do use God as a moral standard and His like message, and whether it be through the Bible, through the Quran, through the Torah. Everyone has their own way of, looking at what is good and what is bad. But history has shown that a lot of people even use religion to justify something that is bad. A lot of people, Israel, Palestine, there's a whole like religion also plays a part because Jewish people believe that is their home that God gave them. Palestine are like, no, this was our home, we've driven it, and they use religion to justify this, or like Crusaders, Christians. They use religion to justify violence. Even Muslims, sometimes they use religion to justify violence when they, bomb or attack places. So, yeah, I think a lot of people do use religion, but you have to be careful about it. Like, if you look at history, a lot of people have done bad things in the name of religion.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think religion as a whole. I mean, I think that more speaks to the fallen nature of people, and less to the inability of God to. It doesn't. That's not a representation of God. That's a representation of those people's. Like that's what I would argue as a Christian. So I'm a Christian. So I strongly believe that like the only way to know God is through His Son Jesus. But I would not equate but I agree with you with the fact that like the crusade, a lot of things the Crusaders did were terrible, and there's been horrible crimes committed throughout history in the face of Christianity. I mean, there were Christians in the South during the Civil War who argued that slavery was something that was taught by the Bible, I would not agree with whatsoever. But I think that is not a representation of God and the lack of His moral standard. That is more a representation of those people and their fallenness and the way in which they've twisted that.
Oh, okay. So it's basically what you're trying to say is people are imperfect, and they're gonna use this message.
They will use anything, even things like religion, even like good things that God gives us. They will turn to purposes that are evil.
Do you think people who are agnostic and atheists don't have a moral standard because they don't follow God?
I would say that if you follow Gnosticism and atheism to their ultimate conclusion, there is no moral standard. But I don't think that people who are atheists and Gnostics don't have a moral standard, but I think their moral standard is based on the moral standard that God's given them, that's written on their heart.
What's the ultimate conclusion of, let's say, atheism?
The ultimate conclusion is that there is no God.
Okay, what of agnostics?
That's more vague. I mean, you would have to describe to me what you think of. What do you think of as being the ultimate conclusion? Describe it to me.
Well, for agnostics, they would think that's... They would say they don't know. So, I don't know what moral standards they will use, because they're not for sure going to use the Bible or the Quran. But I know atheism is like there's no God. Like I know for a fact there's no God.
Atheism. But that's a very arrogant claim. Like think about it. In order for you to say that there's no God, that means you know everything, right?
Yeah.
So do you know everything? Do I know everything? And I mean, of course, we're not like incredibly intelligent individuals. Let's say like there's some amazingly brilliant people in the world. But I think to claim that you know for a fact that there's no God is probably one of the most arrogant claims you can ever make. That means you know everything there is to know. Everything that there ever has been to know, everything there is to know now, and everything that there ever will be to know.
Yeah, I don't think, that's why I think they fall short in that sense. Right. I'm like, how do you, I think there might be intelligence that's way higher than us, than even us humans can understand, that could justify a lot of things. Yeah. So I'm like, who are you to make like I know for a fact. Even it could be even sometimes science could kind of fall short because, as I said, it might be intelligence that's higher than us that we can't even comprehend.
Right.
That could justify some things and that could not justify some things. So yeah, but when you say that when they reach the ultimate conclusion, they have no moral standard, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I would argue. I don't think, if you believe that everything is basically biologically predetermined, right? Like, let's think about it from an evolutionary atheism perspective, right? And then there is, the only standard that there is like whatever works, basically, or whatever is like advantageous. So there's no explanation. I mean, I think this is one of the problems with evolution. There's no explanation for things that we see, like among humans and even among animals, things like altruism and care for other people or something like that. Because if it's just eat or be eaten, then why do we have those things?
Okay.
And I mean, I would say like, and I think that's a certain shortcoming that it has. I mean, like, I just think like, if you were really an atheist, then there is no, if there's nothing out there other than like this world and success in this world, right, let's say, right, there is no moral standard. Like what is the moral standard? The moral standard is whoever comes out on top, right?
Yeah.
And however you get on top, that's fine. So if you have to kill people to get on top, that's fine. If you have to, like take advantage of people, if you have to make other people starve, if you have to do this, there's no problem with that. The answer is like, what is the only thing is like material success here and now, if that. And so there's no standard for what stops that. I mean, like, if you think about something else, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Well, yeah, would you say without religion, the world would be the way it is in terms of rule of law, in terms of the justice system? You think
No, I don't think it would be the way it is. I 100%. I mean, I think that rule of law and our justice system is all based off of both a moral law given to us by God and also a moral law written on like all of our hearts to an extent. Now, again, I say because we're all fallen, that's distorted, so it's not perfect in all of us. I mean, I do things that I know are wrong, and I mean, I'm sure you've done things that you know are wrong, and so we don't perfectly follow that, but it is there. I mean, we do know the very fact that we can do something and then know it's like I have this experience, like we can do something and then know it's wrong.
Yeah, conscience.
If there was no if there was nothing except, if you're an atheist, I don't understand how you can really explain that, if you know what I mean, because there is no standard. There's nothing that's really wrong. So why are we bothered when we do certain things?
Okay, why shouldn't we kill people just because?
What?
Why shouldn't we?
You're asking me a question, or you're saying, are you just?
No, I'm asking you, like, why shouldn't we just kill people?
I mean, well, I would say as a Christian that I think that people are like, and again, I believe the Bible to be the Word of God. I think that's, I mean, we could get into, that's a whole other discussion. But that people are made in the image of God, so that we are a creation that God has made. In some extent, we are not gods, but we're made in His likeness in certain areas, and so God is a God who loves life and preserving life, and so He calls us. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to the fact that God says you don't kill other people.
Okay.
I mean, that would be what I would say comes down to the standard.
Okay.
But the reasons for that are that people are made in the image of God, and that God values life.
Is there a secular reason why you shouldn't kill someone?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by secular. But I think that from an atheistic perspective.
No, not atheist. Just like, just like in law.
From a law perspective.
From a law perspective.
I mean, I think you can argue that it's bad. Like, I think you can look at it from a societal level. And I'm not educated enough necessarily to get into all of this. That like it's bad for society. It does have consequences for the person, other than purely like it can have consequences for your like mental health, all kinds of stuff. It could not. Like there are ways in which societally doing certain things is advantageous. But I would argue that the reason that doing certain things is advantageous to society is because God has instilled those things in us, and God wants human flourishing and the flourishing of society. And so I think that anything that we have within our society that inhibits us from doing those, like the laws that we have that inhibit us from killing each other, let's say, are laws that are based off of the moral standard that God has given us. I mean, you can even go back and to something like the Code of Hammurabi, which is a thing that's hundreds, like thousands of years old, and that's a law code. And I would even argue that something like that I think is based off of God's moral standard. While Hammurabi wasn't even a Christian or like a Jew or whatever, like there's a sense in which he knows that there's a standard of some kind. And if it was just like in that thing, just eat or be eaten, like the biggest guy comes out on top. Why do we need standards? Just kill all your enemies.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, let's make this segue from this whole deep conversation to soccer. Boom. I think Man City has been good. I know you support Man City, I support Chelsea, and I expected Chelsea to win the league, but Man City has been on a tear. And I think they're definitely I would say number one. Maybe Real Madrid and them, number one best teams in the whole entire world right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could definitely throw Bayern in there.
Bayern is also
Bayern
good
had
too.
a good season. They've had some weird results, but they've been pretty good. Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I was kind of disappointed at the end of the year when, over the summer when we didn't get a striker in, and I wasn't really sold on the Harry Kane thing. I don't really see him
this year you should
fitting
have
in.
done it.
And I really thought that Chelsea would come out. Like, I've actually been surprised at the fact that they haven't given more of a challenge. But yeah, I mean, them and Liverpool better be careful because City are I think they're 8 or 9 points clear at the top.
I think more. I think they're 10.
But they're 10 of Liverpool. Liverpool has a game to play
That's true,
still.
that's true,
So it's still reasonable. But if City gets over 10 points up top, I just don't that means that throughout the course of the rest of the season, City would have to lose 4 games. And I mean, Chelsea and Liverpool would have to win out, and City would have to lose 4 games.
Yeah.
That's a lot to ask. They got to be careful because I think it could get out of hand. I mean,
I don't think so.
I've been pleasantly surprised with how good City have been recently, to be honest.
Imagine if they got Harry Kane, man. There will be they could get Erling Haaland too. I can't lie.
I'm really hoping that's what's going to happen. I mean, I'm content. I don't think they're going to get anybody in January, but I think they're going to try to get someone hard next. They're going to go hard for it next summer, to be honest.
Top 4 predictions for this from the Premier League. Top 4.
Top 4 predictions. I think the top 3 are locked up. I think City, Liverpool, and Chelsea will be in there. I think the question comes to 4th.
4th, yes.
I really would like to see West Ham get in there. They're a great story.
No chance.
But I don't think that they're going to do it.
No.
I have to say, right now, and this might be just recency bias, but I have to say I think Arsenal will do it. Even though they lost to Man City, the first half of that game, they went toe to toe with City and they looked decent. They looked good. And even when they got the red card in the beginning of the second half, they still made it difficult for City. They still had a couple of chances, and City, it was basically a last gasp winner to get the win. And United just has too many problems. They're just one week they win, and the next week they'll just lose to someone who's terrible.
And they lost to Wolves, right?
Yeah, and they didn't even look that good. And then they have so much talent, but they just cannot put it together, and they're still trying to figure out their coaching situation. And then Tottenham, the players they have to me are just limited. I mean, they lost yesterday to Chelsea in the EFL Cup.
Yeah, it's not Premier League though.
And it's not. And I just don't see them doing it. So I think, to be honest, I'd probably say City 1. I think unless Chelsea do something, I'm saying Liverpool 2.
Yeah, I think
Chelsea 3, and I think Arsenal will finish in that 4th spot. To be honest, that would be my take on it.
I think Arsenal too. They're doing good because West Ham in the first of the season they were. I think Moyes I think he should be the manager of the season because
I 100% agree.
Yeah, he's literally out of nowhere. No one expected West Ham to be even competing for the top 4 and playing Champions League, not Europa League, Champions League, which is the highest of the highest teams. But then out of a sudden they came and they started to falter a little bit, and they kind of started losing games, and they should have won games. Leicester, I don't know where the hell they are in the Premier League right now because
they've had a rough year.
Yeah, the past 2 seasons they were creeping over that top 4, and the last day they were just
And I thought they were finally going to establish themselves as that team that was in the tier with Arsenal and Tottenham and a United and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's one of the big
6,
7 basically.
Yeah, big 6, 7.
And they really, this year's been tough. They've really got they got decimated by injuries, and they've just really dropped off.
And they're just I think they're in the top 10 right now, but I'm really surprised that they're not even fighting for that 4th place because it's mostly Arsenal, West Ham, and Tottenham. Yeah. Then Man United, still there, but they're not. I don't think they're gonna.
I don't think they're gonna get it.
They have lost a lot of games. And Europa League, imagine Ronaldo playing Europa League, bro.
Well, Barcelona are playing Europa League this year.
But Messi's not though. Barcelona is. Messi is.
But that still was a big shocker, to be honest.
Okay, for the Champions League, who's gonna win? Wait, who's your ideal? Who do you think is gonna be in the final? Because I don't know
I don't know how the brackets gonna work.
Brackets are but what would be your final and who would win the game?
It's really hard to tell. I mean, I think you said the 3 that I think, we talked about the 3 I think that are good. Real Madrid, Bayern, and City. City, I want to say City, but every year I say City, and then they have some choke up. And I think also, when you get in a competition like that, you need the guy who can put the ball in the net. They're not playing Brentford every week. When they're playing teams that are big and, that are better defensively, they're going to need that guy. So, I think City will still get there, although I'm a little tentative about that. I think Bayern are as good a shot as any. Real Madrid, they look really good right now, but they still have a mistake in them now. Like this past weekend, Militao just made a terrible error. They lost to Getafe in the league. Now, it's not going to hurt them because
I think they're going to win the Liga.
I think they're going to win the Liga pretty easily, but it's not the thing. But like to be honest, like this year it's really wide open. Like there's a lot of teams like you think about what Chelsea did last year. Like they were
no one
talking about
thought.
them and they just went on a run. So like, I feel like it could be a team like that who could just like go on a tear and like take it over. To be honest.
Okay, what would you say is the best teams? Do they usually win championship, like the league, or do they win Champions Leagues? Which do you think has more value?
Well, I mean, I think it's the thing about it that's interesting is it's a completely different competition. So like,
that is true.
The league is all about endurance and being able to like play well consistently over the course of like 38 games, let's say in the Premier League. Champions League a lot of it can come down to what happens on a given night. Like, does a guy make a bad tackle? Do you get a red card? Do you give up 3 goals in the first leg and like whatnot? So like, it's Champions League. I think the Champions League is a lot harder to win than the league, just because like the league there is margin for error if you're a great team. The Champions League there's not a lot.
Yeah, you can't make mistakes.
And so like that makes it really difficult. And so like that's what I mean about having a good goal scorer, because I think like a good goal scorer, and also like it really helps you because you need to like consistently be able to put the ball in the back of the net, to be honest. And that's the only thing that like you can definitely count on, because you never know what's going to happen within those games.
Alrighty, Micah, that has been the end of the Ozigi Chronicles number 13. Thank you so much for coming as a guest in this studio. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right.